I arrived at his apartment thinking everything was under control. Everything seemed normal until I heard the door open. It was her, his wife. And of course, she showed up at the worst possible moment. We were in the bedroom, literally seconds before everything went downhill. We heard her come in, her footsteps, the sound of the keys. Everything happened so fast. I froze. I knew that if she saw me there, it was over. There was no time for explanations, no place to hide. There was only one option: get out of there fast. I ran to the window as quickly as I could, without even thinking. Fear made me act purely on instinct. I leaned out and held onto the frame, hanging outside the apartment like I was in some kind of movie. My hands were shaking. I felt completely exposed. I could hear her inside, talking to him, and I knew that one wrong move and I'd be caught. Time stopped for a second until a neighbor appeared. He saw me hanging from the window, nervous and barely holding on, and without hesitating, he helped me climb into his apartment. He didn't say a word, didn't ask anything. He just held me and guided me inside. It was awful. One moment I was about to be caught, and the next I was safe inside someone else's apartment, trying to calm down. Sitting there, a little calmer but still breathing hard, I couldn't believe what had just happened. Everything I had planned fell apart in seconds. The whole perfect moment I imagined being there with him disappeared, replaced by adrenaline and the fear that everything could explode at any moment. I replayed everything in my head. I walked in, we were alone, everything felt normal, and in an instant, she showed up. Everything changed. There was no time to react, no space to move. The only option left was the window and the escape. Everything else happened too fast to process. As I sat there, still shaking, I kept thinking about how absurd it all was. We were lying there watching Netflix, wink wink, and I ended up hanging from a window, rescued by a neighbor I barely knew. It was one of those moments that don't even feel real, but you know you'll remember forever. My heart was still racing, and as I tried to calm down, I knew this wasn't going to be the end. It was only the beginning. The tension, the fear, the situation, it was all going to continue. And the worst part? His wife had no idea, and I couldn't breathe easily until I was far away from that door. While I talked to the neighbor, trying to catch my breath and stop my hands from shaking, I couldn't help hearing what was happening inside his apartment. At first, they were talking quietly, short words, but suddenly, everything blew up. Yelling, things hitting the walls, something falling. It sounded like they were throwing things because I heard objects hitting furniture and the floor, that sharp noise of something breaking. There I was, hidden and safe, but listening to his wife confronting him. Everything I had been afraid of was happening right there. Every word I managed to catch made the chaos feel even bigger. He tried to defend himself, raise his voice, but she was louder, angrier. I stayed there, frozen, trying to process everything. I could feel every scream, every crash, everything that had happened, the fear, the window escape, the neighbor saving me, all mixed with the reality of what I was hearing. It was like watching a disaster in slow motion. No one could predict how it would end, but the adrenaline kept me glued to the wall, listening even if it was the only thing I could do. I felt strangely relieved and guilty at the same time. Relieved because I managed to escape, guilty because I was part of the chaos that was unfolding. I knew this was going to have consequences. Finally, the yelling started to fade. I heard footsteps, doors slamming, and then a sudden silence. For the first time since everything began, I could breathe without feeling like I was about to collapse. I was safe, for now. I leaned back against the wall, closed my eyes for a second, and just let my mind process the insanity of what had just happened. After hearing the yelling, the crashing, the chaos, finally a silence came that felt endless. I stayed a bit longer, leaning against the neighbor's wall, taking deep breaths, trying to stop my body from shaking. 30 minutes passed like hours. Every minute felt like a challenge because I knew that one wrong move could ruin everything. But no one appeared. No one looked at me. No one said a word. The building was silent and empty. And for the first time in this madness, I felt a small sense of relief. I waited, going over every step I had taken in my mind, making sure I left no trace, that no one had seen me escape through the window, that everything was still under control. When I was sure, I moved quickly, trying to leave without being seen, every step measured, every move calculated. Finally, I reached the elevator and went down without anyone suspecting a thing. Adrenaline still coursed through my veins, but the worst was over. I had survived one of the craziest situations I'd ever imagined. As I walked home, I couldn't help but laugh a little, though deep down I was still a bit scared. Yes, now I can tell the story and laugh, but in that moment, I was fully aware that one mistake could have been disastrous, that someone could have caught me there. It was a mix of fear and relief, but also a quiet satisfaction in having survived. When I finally got home, calmer and almost breathing normally, I checked my phone. There were several messages from him. The first one said something like, "Relax, my wife didn't notice. She just suspected. She had no idea you were with me." I read that message over and over, trying to process it. I sat on the couch, rested my head, and couldn't help but smile. I had been there, hidden, caught between risk and chaos. That moment made me reflect on how absurd and extreme what I had just lived through was. The whole plan I had, the risk I took, the improvised window escape, it had all been worth it. But it also reminded me that danger was always present. That mix of fear and adrenaline is something you never forget. And even though I can laugh about it now, I can't deny that in that moment, I was acutely aware that everything could go wrong. Now we meet 3 times a week, but more cautiously. No more lone apartments, no windows, no unnecessary risks. Just motels, places where we can control the situation and stay under the radar. There's caution, yes, but also that spark of danger that keeps things interesting. And as I sit here telling this, I can't help but ask, now I ask you, the ones listening, would you be able to escape like this in the middle of a disaster to avoid being discovered? Or would you stay and face the consequences? Leave your answers in the comments. I want to see how you'd really react in a situation like this. And yes, before you say it, I know I was wrong for being with someone who was married. I don't need anyone to remind me. But there's something I also want to make clear. When I met him, he never told me he was married. Never. Not a hint, not a comment, not a sign. He presented himself as free, single, with nothing to hide. And I, unknowingly, got involved in a story that had already been complicated from the start. It wasn't until much later, after feelings had developed, trust had formed, and many encounters had happened, that I discovered the truth. And by then, I was already in. It's easy to say, just leave, but when you're involved, when you've spent time with that person, when they've shared their life, or at least the part they showed you, it's not that simple to just flip a switch and be done. That doesn't justify anything, I know, but it explains why I kept seeing him, why I took risks I never thought I would, and why I ended up escaping through a window like part of a surreal scene. Sometimes you only understand your decisions when you look back. And even though many will judge me, and I know they will, the truth is that situation left its mark, not just because of the adrenaline, the fear, or the escape. It marked me because it forced me to see what I was really getting into and to understand that we don't always know people as well as we think we do. Now, I want to ask you, if you were in a situation like this, would you run to save yourself or stay and face the consequences, even knowing it could ruin everything? Leave your answers in the comments. I want to know how you'd really react and if what I did was the right choice.